Nisha, we're so excited that you've agreed to be a change maker guest speaker in our podcast series, Thriving in the Age of Disruption. We would love to hear your thoughts on gaining the essential mindset and skills needed to thrive in today's age of disruption. We are going to explore the key themes around entrepreneurial mindset, crisis resilience, spirituality, and living a simple life. In the beginning of 2020, when COVID was here, we had the opportunity to collaborate together in a project called the Asian Women Leadership Program. And we found that we are kindred spirits. We have common areas of intersection. So introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay, sure, Ramesh. I can't wait to have this conversation with you. So I'm an advocate and a spirited campaigner for women's empowerment and gender equity. I typically work with women professionals and entrepreneurs in the tourism and hospitality industry who face challenges, accessing economic opportunities, resources, networks, as well as intelligence. So I help to harness their growth potentials of these women through capacity building, education, as well as through their social capital. That's what I'm passionate about. I grew up from the tourism and hospitality industry. I focus on women in this industry because 70% of our industry is driven by women, but the trajectory of women sadly has not been to our expectations. In the last couple of years, my work has been centering on women.
You've picked an area which is very important because women probably are 80% of the workforce in tourism, hospitality, or would it be even higher than that?
Depending on which destinations we are talking about, here you can say that's the average of 60 to 80% on different parts of the world.
How do you think people would describe you, especially family members and close friends? What would be the 3 words that they would use?
So the very first word that people would describe me is as a social butterfly. So I love being with people. I think people bring the best out of me, and I love networking. So I spend a large amount of my time in personal and professional networking. And I think I have a natural curiosity to find out about people. The second word that people will describe me as would be the word positive. Regardless of whatever the challenge, difficulties, or negativity around me, I'm a very positive person in every little thing that I look at. So I think it's a frame of mind that I have, that everything is for a reason, and there's a good reason behind what and why something is happening. And I think that's a positive energy that draws positive people towards me, positive manifestations and positive events. Did you ask for 3?
Yeah, well, yes. What would be the third? I could maybe step in and say something, and I found
Sure.
you to be someone who's generous, because there have been many times when, I needed to connect to someone or to do something, and you tend to be my go-to person. So not only do you have a wide network, and that is true, you're a social butterfly, and you
Nokia, you see, so Nokia is about connecting people.
you have this positivity, but also you're very generous with your network, and and if there's something that I needed and I dropped you a message, you would give me at least 3 people to go and check out or have a conversation with. And
Right.
and I think
Ramesh, I think one of the important things that I have discovered in my journey is that there have been a lot of people who are very generous with their time, wisdom, and their resources. Otherwise, I would not have grown through this path. Many people, including yourself, have been very, very generous. There have been guardian angels who have helped me around. And I think once we are receptive to that sort of, generosity in people, we also learn that it is important for us to also pay it forward, especially women. I think we should have the capacity to receive generously and to give generously, so that as a tribe we can, thrive, I would say, or flourish.
Yes.
Flourish, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I love also the issue of reciprocity, which is what you're talking about. Maybe it's a learned phenomena, because, you sort of experience it and then you get engaged and you start to reciprocate. Maybe there are some people who are just born that way. But I definitely think that if more of us practiced it, the world will be such an easier place, because, there's something that we can always contribute to another person. How do you view, or how do you define success and failure in life? I mean, what's success and what's failure in your life?
That's a very deep question. I would say, at different points of our lives, okay, let me be specific to my life, the definition of success has evolved. Of course, in the earlier part of my life, it's really about my socio-economic trajectory. So I strived and I tried my very best to climb the corporate ladder, to learn, and a lot to do with, about moving up and learning the ropes of the industry. And to a point that I learned, yes, I was very successful in picking up all that, At a certain stage in my life, success was defined by my own self-growth. So when I went into whether it's educating myself further or certifying myself further or learning from the gurus around, whether it is corporate gurus or spiritual gurus and all, I saw myself growing. To me, that was an important definition of my success. I've arrived at a point, particularly, I would say that in the smack of the COVID, when the first tool was a challenge to me, I learned to relook at the definition of success. And I found, to me, last year, June, I realized what success was. If I could live a life true to myself, I would define it as success. That means I don't have to do things which is an expectation of people, expectation of my industry, or expectation of my organization. Or even the country that we live in, but if I can truly live a life that is true to myself and what I really want at this point in my life, then I think that would be success. Not that I've arrived there, Ramesh.
Yes.
I think I'm on my journey towards there.
I love the way you've decoded success as an evolution, and how you have actually linked it back to your life stages, living your life, being true to yourself, and how that discovery was made in the midst of COVID.
Yeah.
And the courage that it will take to actually stay true on that course. It's a good time to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and your entrepreneurial experience. I look at entrepreneurship is that I think it's a necessary way of life, especially in this era of disruption. And I think that, if people have an entrepreneurial mindset, whether they are being a householder or they are a student or they are an activist, or even someone who's working in a corporate environment, that allows them to be effective in the face of disruption as well as change. And then, of course, there are some of us who may actually be excited about, starting a business and running it. And that's another game altogether. So you've been an academic and, in the midst of it, you've gone and started a consultancy firm. And in the midst of COVID, you've then, started off with, co-founded another organization and done also a collaboration with us that we did with Asian Women's Leadership Program. When you look back at your journey, what is it that you see about your entrepreneurial mindset?
Okay. I think the entrepreneurial mindset but it gave me the freedom to do what I wanted. If I had worked for a organization, you had to be defined by somebody. What are your milestones, what you have to do, what you can do, what you cannot do. There were limitations and barriers. But after 2 decades of working, I arrived at a point where I had personal inspirations. I wanted to make an impact on community and societies, and I felt that working within an organization is not going to allow me to do that. I find it very stifling, so to be spirited, to be free and spirited, to me, I felt that I need to move in the direction of being an entrepreneur, right? So I would say, yes, the freedom is what I really wanted, to experiment and no judgments other than myself judging, So that's where I started. And again, like I said, the generosity of people around. The moment you have a goal that is so authentic, a goal that is so focused on not you, but to uplifting society for the goodness of the community, somehow I feel that like-minded people will start to gravitate towards you and support your entrepreneurial journey. So I couldn't have done this by myself, I would say. The moment I start an idea, like I said, to Ramesh, to yourself and Purin, I said, can we do this? And you guys, yeah, definitely, let's do this, and I find similar-minded entrepreneurs saying, yes, let me support you. I go on LinkedIn in the smack of the COVID, and I said, let's do something for women in tourism in Asia. And another entrepreneur, Zinal, she's in India, and she said, yeah, let me help you with this, and I found other entrepreneurs say, come, let's do this together. All right. So my ideas and my businesses are not mine, I would say. Right. It's actually a collaboration and a partnership of many like-minded entrepreneurs. And the World Women Tourism specifically, I want to share, it was not even my original idea. I've always wanted to do work with women. I didn't even start the company, but 2 men came along. They saw me speak on a United Nations stage. And they came to me and they said, Nisha, I've got an idea. Would you want to listen to it? I said, yes, why not? And they said, look at this. Women make up more than 70% of our labor force, but lots of work can be done. Let's start this company. You front it. We support you. Would you like to start World Women Tourism? And I'm like, even the title, the name, everything came from 2 men, and that's the thing. We got to be open, porosity, be porous to ideas, whether it comes from women or men. In this situation, 2 men gave me the idea. So why don't you do some work for women's empowerment, particularly in Asia, right? And I was receiving it and very wholeheartedly. And I said, yes, let's do it, right? And I think you need to have the guts to say, yes, I would do it, good or bad. Like I said, maybe that's positive streak in me. And I said, yeah, let's do it, good or bad, we will make it happen. And I think as an entrepreneur, you need to have that positive outlook to say, do it. And I think I've also always been someone who has got lots of determination to make things work. So challenges will be there in your journey as an entrepreneur, but you focus, you strive and persevere, and you will see the outcomes. And people who are similar to you will definitely gravitate towards you and uplift your ideas. So right. That is actually my entrepreneurial journey. But again, we meander, right? We meander. It's not at a point where you say, oh, I've grown enough. This is a company that I'm so happy. But every day you have new ideas, new thoughts, people join your journey, and your entrepreneurial journey will start to shift. And you don't have to be where you started. That willingness to say that I want to be agile, the willingness to say that it's okay, I flow with what opens up, and let's see, it's a discovery. So entrepreneurial journey to me is a discovery.
I think you've actually described very accurately some of your maybe habits that make you successful and productive as an entrepreneur. And it's definitely something that people who are looking to have a breakthrough in running a business or in adopting an entrepreneurial mindset can borrow from you. So let's also ask one more thing, right? In the midst of whatever crisis that you've had, whether it was in your entrepreneurial journey or whether it was in academia or whether it was in your personal life, what have you learned from those crises? And if you can just talk us through one of them, that would be great.
Okay. I think I'm so bold to say that every crisis only opened up opportunities to me. SARS, I remember when the whole travel trade was in the pits, right? And we were so worried. Our industry was so badly hit, but that opportunity was a breakthrough for me because that started my training journey. If not for SARS, I would not perhaps gone into training. And today, that is one of my fortes, right? In Singapore, the government supported it in that. At a certain point where I couldn't work due to health reasons, I said, okay, let me just take stock of time and do my master's. And this was like decades ago. And amazingly, the moment I finished my master, there was a big opportunities for academics, practitioners, and they were like less than 5 in Singapore who were there. And I was given an opportunity to go into lecturing because of that crisis. If I were to look at the current pandemic, World Women Tourism took a flight during that time. She in Tourism started, Asian Women Leadership Program started, our global webinar started, my podcast started, everything started when I had a downtime, because if not for the crisis, I would be all over the world working from airports. In fact, my PhD was completed because I had the downtime during the crisis. So if the COVID-19 didn't happen, I may not have the time to sit down and finish my PhD. So I think this was, to me, in many ways, a fantastic opportunity and a blessing. Having said that, I want to also qualify that it's all in your mind. I lost $250,000 of project when the COVID struck. I could be moping around. Well, I did to one point get into a mental downtime. I don't know what to do. Everything I built was gone. I was devastated. I don't know if I would ever be relevant again post-COVID. My mind was in a flux. I didn't know where I was going. I had to be very open and receptive. I'm a coach, but I had to invite a coach into my life and say, tell me what I'm going through. Help me through this. Receive help in that crisis. And clarity came. Journaling helped me together with the coach. And I started to see the crisis in a different light. So I think in many ways, it's not just the opportunities came, but you create your opportunities in every crisis. So if I were to reflect back, I wouldn't say that a crisis just gave me the opportunity, but I think at every crisis, I started to evaluate my life. I started to accept that I was going through a difficult period. But what do I want to do about that? I sought help from different points, different people at different point of my life to help me through that period. And yes, I would say every crisis was a major breakthrough for me. And I wouldn't have come to this point if not for the crisis in my lives.
I really love the way you've described it because, as you know, I'm completing my book on crisis resilience, and I have a 4-step method for people to get out of a crisis. And I talk about first being self-aware that we are in a crisis or we have a setback. And, you've described how, when you start to experience those emotions, whether it's a frustration or being lost or being devastated, it's the first moment that we can be aware that there is something that's going on that it's uncomfortable or is uncertain.
Yeah.
And then of the second step, which we talk about in terms of acceptance, was when what do I do? Had you reach out to that coach, take on reflection through journaling and to bring greater clarity to what was really happening so that you could own the next step of actions that you wanted to take towards that new future, which I call as action is step 3 and step 4 is actually self-actualization, where, you get to this new you and that opportunity, right, all came about, that new you, because you had that original setback or the crisis. So thank you
Very
for
nice.
spending some time.
So you gave
to
me a
explain.
framework for the way that I came out of my crisis and became
Yeah.
resilient. Thank you.
You started off this conversation talking about how, you're someone who has a positive outlook. And what's really clear is that you're someone who is able to reframe in that setback, right? And it comes from an acceptance, and it's not just like, you're doing some positive thinking and saying you're not dealing with the actual issue you are. And you're also bringing forward that positive energy to move forward.
Yeah.
One other thing that I wanted to ask about crisis is that if you have any advice in terms of, dealing with crisis.
Like I earlier said, the first advice that I always give to people is that, yes, the crisis brings a lot of negative thoughts in our head, a lot of challenge in our mindset. Physically, you start to even feel, panicky. A constant awareness of yourself is very important, being mindful of what you are going through, what's going through my head, what's going through my body. If you really have a very, very close intimacy with yourself, with that clarity, we begin to be a little bit more positive to say, okay, I think I can take stock of this because I know what I'm going through, and have that positive mindset to say that there's a reason why this is going on and it's going to bring an opportunity. And what would that be? So reframe the situation, redirect your energies towards thinking positively. Thirdly, I keep saying again, be very porous and be open to receiving help. There will be someone, who will be your safety net. Think about who that is, without judgments, someone who would be there to listen to what you have to say, give you a kick in the butt if they think you deserve it at that point, and shake you up and say, wake up. And you don't seek them when you arrive at a crisis. You seek them before you come to a crisis point in your life, and be there closely connected with this person because you need them one day. And you don't go to them when the crisis happens, right? So it's not your friends that you go to when you have a crisis. It's not your family that you should go to because they will be very sympathetic, empathetic, very nice. But sometimes you need someone to tell you what you don't want to hear. Who is that safety net that you have invested in?
That's very interesting because in some ways it's counterintuitive, because on the one hand, you describe it as a safety net. And at the same time, you're going to this person because they will say something that you don't like to hear or don't want to hear. And that's that exact thing that you need to hear at that moment.
That's right.
And I love the way you described it. It's interesting because from all that you've said so far, we sort of get a sense about who you are with people and how you work with people. And maybe you could share something about your own evolution in terms of how you work with people to get the best out of people and any kind of collaboration that you do.
I think I've been following this throughout my whole life. We have financial planning, right? We save money, we invest, and we plan for the future. Then we have health plan. Okay, we do this, we do that, we do exercise. I don't know how many of us have got this relationship plan. Like, who do you want to invest your time with? Who you want to be surrounded by? Whose ideas do you want to hear? Who are the people who will kick you in the butt and wake you up? Who should be the one who will be lifting you up? You know, I don't know how many of us really, really sit down and have a relationship map and a relationship plan. And maybe I was doing it very randomly, but I think all the while I've been doing it, you know. Um, we need to have that concerted effort to plan this, you know. It's like certain times you want to be with people who, you know, we go for a meal, a feast, correct? We go for a feast. But sometimes we need an intellectual feast, you know, to be with some people who would give you that idea, you know, the generation of that idea who will spark you, who would wow kind of thing. And you don't want to spend time with frivolous Saturday afternoon talking about some Netflix series, you know. Well, I'm not saying anything bad about it, but I'm just saying that sometimes we want to have that intellectual feast. So who would be part of that feast, you know, who will sit at the table and feed you with that intellectual stimulation? I think we need to think carefully about things like that. Who are your emotional vultures, you know, that you want to minimize your association with, who would take that energy out of you? If we really plan quite carefully, we will be surrounded by people who will inspire you, who would uplift you, who would generously give their time and energy. And they will also give you that space to do it, you know, teach you how to do it. And therefore you grow in that journey. So it's the same analogy as you would do for a financial plan. You know, you go to a financial consultant, right? And the same, you could plan your relationship plan. So think about who you want to be, that 5 people that you want to surround yourself, because you are an average of 5 people. Think about who is it that is going to be your safety net, who will kick you and wake you up. Who are the people that you want to be? Then when I say people, so they could be part of your intellectual feast too. They're human, they're people out there, but they don't have to be next to you. So, you know, they could be digitally next to you and you are listening into them. So one fine day, you know, once you listen to these people, you become familiar with these people. Once you meet them, my God, it can open the doors. It has happened to me. You know, I can go up to them and say, I've learned enough about you and I would like to get to know you. You know, and that opens doors. But if you don't invest your time in getting to know these people well enough, when you see them, you get fearful, you get intimidated because that familiarity is not there. But when you are familiar with their work, you're familiar with their thought process, you understand that they're human, you know, and it allows you and gives you the confidence to go up to them and say, I want to get to know you better. I want to be in your proximity, you know. So that I think to me, it's a lesson that I have learned. To really, you know, put it into a perspective, what I've always been doing. And today, I think I've got more clarity that, okay, that's what brought me through my journey with people.
And that's so clear about you, Nisha. I mean, you might not have your relationship plan or a map, you know, like a formal thing, like, you know, our health plan or our financial plan, but you're definitely working from some structure. It'll be really useful for people to actually take that on. You know, you also talk about social capital, and how is it connected to this aspect of the relationship plan?
Yeah, social capital is your network, your acquaintanceships, you know, that people who would come, you know, together with you to elevate your trajectory, isn't it? You know, and so trajectory can be social, could be psychological, could be spiritual, could be economic. That's what you need to invest in your social capital. But I think a lot of people, especially the millennials, I find that they are so into other forms of capital. Social capital, it's amazing. You know, it of course will bring you to an economic capital that you want one day. You know, when I go for my yoga, right, you know, there I am doing yoga on one mat. But I would turn around to look at somebody in the next mat and think about, you know, how can I get to know this person? One fine day, we might have mutual interests. It could be a business venture, it could be something else. And it's so, my God, they have come into my life in a way that has been amazing. We become sometimes fantastic friends. So, I can just do my yoga and walk away like many people do. But sometimes you turn around, you invest in the person next to you. That's what mindfulness is all about. You're mindful of the person next to you and you give a little bit more attention to that person. Amazing things can spark, actually. In our busy world, we just don't do enough of that. You think about, Celestine prophecy, right? I mean, how many of us listen to that intuition and say, hey, maybe I should give that attention where I'm feeling for it, But that's where I think the spiritual part comes in, I guess.
And tell us a little bit more about that, how much of it is in your life, in your day-to-day activities.
My spiritual orientation.
Not just orientation, but, your journey, your expression of it, or even, what you do that is spiritual for you.
Right. I think, I don't know when this thing actually started. Maybe I've always been spiritual. I'm not sure, but I think the awareness came when I was in Bhutan. Sometimes you need to be in the right space at the right time with the right mind frame. I was in Bhutan and climbing up, one of the Buddha point. And a sudden shift in awareness came to me. I just want to clarify, it's nothing religious, but it's about finding a higher meaning, a personal meaning to everything that I do, whether it's work or otherwise. It's about interrelationship with not only people, but with the environment, the word transcendence, going to a higher level with respect to meaning, the whys. It's a higher level. Sometimes I think it's beyond me to understand why I do certain things, but I'll leave it, surrender, and say, let it happen, let it happen. There's a reason why this is happening. So that shift in my consciousness, it's an inner journey, an inner discovery, an inner consciousness shifted when I was in Bhutan. And I gave that space and the time to think about what's going on. Furthering that journey, I think I started to then think very carefully about, if I do something, what is that meaning in it for me? What's my moonshot at the end of the day? It cannot be something just for me. So if at once upon a time, I used to say, I want to do work with women because I will feel the joy. No, it's not that. What's in it for them? A lot of things shifted. So I'm a trainer, I'm a speaker, I go on many, many platforms, but I have learned to say that before I open my mouth in front of an audience, I speak out there and say, it's not about my ego. Don't make me conscious about what I'm saying, because then it becomes all about me. Just give me the wisdom to say something that someone in the audience needs to hear. Allow me to say some things to the audience that is going to uplift them and help them. And believe me, Ramesh, the moment I say that to the universe and say, it's not about me, don't let it be my ego, don't let it be about me, I think I stop my fear. Of course, we get stage fright at any point in our lives. And I'll tell you, I get butterflies all the time when I step on stages or I speak. But the moment I say this out, somehow my fear just disappears. I think that's something very spiritual in my work that I'm doing.
I can't agree more. And I love the way you sort of connect to that higher consciousness. Then you allow yourself to become that instrument for people to hear and to take away those meaning for themselves in their life.
That's right. I mean, we become mere conduits, at the end of the day. So when you can actually see yourself in that way, I think that itself is very, very, very spiritual. And you find meaning in everything that you do, and I wouldn't say that it has always been the way I do my work, but I think the moment I went on that journey 7 years ago to Bhutan, I think a lot has shifted. I think different strokes for different folks. You might find it right in the smack in Singapore in the garden, maybe. For me, it was Bhutan, and it will always be the place that I started my spiritual journey.
Oh, thank you.
And with 3 years into my journey, of my PhD, and the topic was called Spirituality in Tourism Education.
Oh,
Because
wow.
because I felt that, a humanistic way of teaching is not going to do justice to the tourism industry. We are going to get people who are very much, self-centered in the way tourism development, which is what has happened, the over-tourism and all that. My PhD was all about, let's teach these students and future practitioners with a spiritual orientation, where we tell them that, tourism is beyond you and I. It's about a community, it's about an ecology. Show that respect, show that love, the interrelationship and the interdependence is what is going to create a long-term sustainability. This is what our classrooms should be talking about. When we step in as educators, bring ourselves, our authenticity in, and don't fake it. We are beyond everything, and it's not the way we start to teach, because spiritual orientation is not about preaching. It's about being authentic and talking about our vulnerabilities in a classroom. I'm going to do what my heart tells me to do. And I'm so happy that I did a topic which is so aligned to my values.
Wow, it takes courage to do that. And like you described, it is also a journey. And we don't have to fret if we are not there and not able to do it yet, because there will be a moment if we are open and we are listening to our inner voice, that, we can use that moment to tip over, be on a journey to elevate our consciousness. So thank you for sharing this very deep conversation about spirituality. So moving on, so is it possible for us to live a simple life in today's world? And what would be a simple life for you?
Yeah, I think that is such a subjective thing. What is simple life? What is simplicity? Actually, interestingly, I've been thinking about it and talking about this the whole morning. I had done so much of work and made an impact and changes. And sometimes in the journey, I've been burned out because of the hours I give. And I just said that I am going to lead a simple life next year, 2022. I'm just going to go and gravitate towards Bhutan and just do nothing for 1 year. It's difficult to do nothing for 1 year, but I think I'll just do what my heart tells me to do, living a life that is true to myself. That's what I said from the beginning. So just going to a place and just looking at wellness, looking at yoga and meditation, and looking at what I could do with women out there. Don't expect too much, from that work, but impacting the lives of the people and the community and my own life, So stepping back, sit back and be an observer sometimes, rather than a doer. Just enjoy the being rather than the doing. I think that's simple life to me.
Wow.
Enjoy the being rather than the doing.
That's a good way to describe it. Right? Moving from the doing to just being.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to describe thriving in a few words, what would be those few words? How can we thrive as a tribe or as a community or as an individual?
Yes. So again, going back to different stages, thriving and flourishing. I love the word flourishing, Ramesh, rather than thriving, because we only can flourish if we are able to uplift ourselves and the people around us. If you look at the people around you and say, you have uplifted some people, take a young one under your wings, groom them, grow together, and then you flourish. Take a community, and see what you could do, just a seed, right? And then you see them grow. When we did our Asian Women Leadership Program, it's just a seed that we seeded a thought, but how people picked up from there, they connected with each other. They are developing businesses, ideas amongst themselves. We don't know what we sparked in them, all right? But on hindsight, when we think about it, that's a really a fantastic way of flourishing. Of course, as we are givers, we are also receivers. We will receive it, but to me, that is what we can do at this point, where we can flourish together.
Thank you, Dr. Nisha Abu Bakar.
So thank you, Ramesh, because sometimes when we converse, right, you rethink about your perspectives, and it's nice to sometimes go into our inner journeys and recollect what we are doing, putting things into perspective. So I love the dialogue. Very beautiful questions, and I am hopeful that people will. It becomes a survival guide to somebody else, isn't it? Whatever
Yes.
we are going to be sharing, and I hope likewise this would be an instrument for whoever is going to be listening in.
Yes, and that's the intention of this
It
podcast.
is. Brilliant job, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this journey.
Oh, we're so honored to have you. Thank you very
My
much.
pleasure.
Dear listeners, if you've been listening and enjoying the Thriving in the Age of Disruption podcast series, as well as our Mastery Effect podcast series, we'll appreciate it very much if you can share with us the topics that are close to your heart so that we can source the relevant experts and change makers and have them be on our show. Do comment below and let us know where you are commenting from and what is it that is of biggest concern to you.